Good Wednesday to you, everybody in com/gov664. Welcome to week. Are you ready for this? Boom! 5. We are past the halfway point, rounding the corner, and heading towards the final stretch. Okay, not quite there yet. Because actually, I'm probably not going to assign much in the way of readings and work on week 8. I want you to have the time to go back and review what we didn't get ready for the final exam. All right, but speaking of getting ready, let's get ready for this video. Okay, what do we have here? Oh, oh. Jeff Gardner writes, very interesting. Well, what does he write? A number of things, um, including a recently released book. But enough about me. Let's get to you. Okay, so per usual, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing this week, and then we're going to take a look at what you did last week, go through the questions, see what we can add, help flesh things out, get you thinking about these, and give you an indication of what will probably be the focus of the final exam. Okay, so this week we are going to take. So last week we looked at government's impact on media. This way, we're going to flip the script. We're going to look at some ways that media might influence public policy and public opinion. The so-called, CNN effect. That is where lawmakers are responding to what it is that media is doing, and or how media covers something can influence policy, or wait, can it influence policy? Okay. Um, and your second movie review was due yesterday, Tuesday the 9th. I noted when I looked in the module on Canvas, excuse me, I shouldn't talk with things in front of my mouth. I get that. I noticed when I looked at the module on Canvas that some of you have not turned it in. Please get it in. Turn that work in. It's an 8-week course, so things go bam, 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 and then we're done. I will post the link for movie review number 3 today or tomorrow, but the instructions for all 4 of the movie reviews are in the sheet, which is the same by week 1, week 2. So if you want to start thinking about movie number 3 and when to watch it now, that would be okay too. All right. I just don't have the link up yet. Okay. But there's actually 2 or 3 of you who have not turned that in. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but I really need you to make sure that you do. That taken all together, it's worth a substantive amount of your grade. All right. So you want to stay on top of that. Just FYI, movie review number 3 will be due actually, because we're coming down to it. So we've got to kind of hustle. Will be due next week. On the syllabus, it says what, the 16th through the 22nd is the week. So we'll probably push it towards the back end. But 6 of one, half a dozen of another, there's going to be a small gap between when movie reviews are due. Maybe we'll do that between 3 and 4. Okay, you get the point. Get it done. Get it in. All right. Let's take a look at what you did last week. And oh yeah, by the way, so this week's readings, you're only reading in PIP, and it's a short book, and it's 5 chapters, so it's fairly short. Okay. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting. In the discussion though for week 5 for this week, I have given to you an option for a little extra credit for those of you who feel that you need it. Right, and I'll give you 10 extra points for the bonus question. Okay. Now, I'm making no presumptions about the video that I've attached to the question, and what the potential answer to the question is. That is, if you look in the discussion section for this week 5, you'll see under bonus question, it goes like this. In your supported opinion, let me stop right there. When I use that phrase, and I would like you to adopt that phrase, you say, well, in my supported opinion, blah, blah, blah. What I'm meaning and what I'd like you to mean by that is I've done some work. I've looked at this, I've read this, I've weighed out contrary opinions and various views, and using my ever developing power of reason, I've come to the conclusion of boink. Informed opinion to do that, rather than, well, I feel. Now, I'm not saying that feelings are bad. Okay. Emotional intelligence, very interesting topic, by the way. Important to how we process communications. However, you should be on your guard to not letting your emotional intelligence lead the way in your understanding, and especially, and this one's really critical, the conclusions that you make about yourself, the world around you, your interaction with others, and so on and so forth. Why? Because emotional intelligence tends to be reactionary, okay, as opposed to whatever term you like, intellectual intelligence or analytical intelligence tends to be action oriented. In other words, this happened and I can see a relationship to this. The question that we're always getting at in communications is it correlation or is it causation? Meaning, are two things happening at the same time just because they are, or is one thing happening and it's causing the other? That's like whoosh, whoosh, over here. Okay, so emotional intelligence is reactionary. Intellectual or considered or thought intelligence, whatever word you like, is action oriented. That is, it looks at the relationship between actions. As a developing communication professional, and even if you're in government, this will serve you best as you move through life, not only in making decisions and evaluations about yourself, especially because that's where we tend to expend most of our mental energy, but also in understanding how the world works around you, which, by the way, that's your job as someone in communications and or government. All right, you're an analyst. You're you're a pattern seeker. You're I can see that this is happening and that's causing this and this and this and this. That's why you're here. I'm writing here something. So to encapsulate this sort of use your intellectual intelligence. All right, and then how it serves you both professionally and personally. I'm going to give you a very important piece of information. In fact, I'm going to give you the secret to successful and happy life, the secret sauce, if you will. Are you ready? And the beauty is in the simplicity. All right, here we go. Here, let's see if I can get the camera to focus. There we go. Here it is. It's an equation. The secret sauce to life is an equation, and it's E plus R equals O. All right. You go ahead and jot that down quickly or commit it to memory. E plus R equals O. What does that mean? It means the event, whatever is happening, plus your reaction drives the outcome. E plus R equals O. So we're going to go back to the bonus point question, I promise. But if you develop those critical thinking skills and you start with the, in my supported opinion position, all right, and you will train yourself to get into the habit of taking careful consideration of the E of the event before you insert the R, the reaction that's going to drive the O. Now, here's the thing. You're going to have a reaction. There's going to be an R. That's the essence of communication and politics and human relations under whatever heading that you study it. There's going to be a reaction. The question is, what sort of outcome will that reaction drive? Now, here's the bonus to you as a practitioner, as a deep meditator of this formula, this secret sauce. O, outcome, drives the next E, event. So the more impact you have on the O, the more impact you'll have on the E. And the more impact that you have on the E, the more fluidly and deftly and advantageously you'll be able to craft your R. All right. So short 4 words, but there's a lot I want you to understand in there. In your supported opinion, is the media's coverage of the war with Iran encouraging the Iranians to drag out the negotiations with the United States, prolonging this conflict? Okay, because they're not now. Again, I'm not taking any political sides on this. I mean, I have an opinion. If you want my opinion, email me. I'll tell you, but that's not what we're at today. Is how the media is treating this, stretching it out by sending certain messages to the opposing side. Now, I've given you now you don't have to watch the video that goes with this bonus question, right? You can, I mean, if you're like, yeah, man, I am all over that. I've been watching, and the media, the way they're covering it is doing this. Maybe you think that the media is covering it in such a way that it made it look like Iran was just going to be a walkover. And then like whoa, what? They didn't give up. And the Iranians are like, oh, okay, they think that we're going to be, easily rolled. This works to our advantage because the United States won't make plans for the long game. So all we got to do is hold out, just hunker down, and they can't outlast us. Okay, so maybe that's where you're at. Or maybe where you're at is you're watching media and going, the media is running around saying we're losing the war, the Iranians are winning. We haven't met our objectives. We're a puppet of Israel. President Trump doesn't know what he's doing, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not saying that I'm not advocating any of these positions. I'm saying this is what you're hearing in the media. And you say, okay, because the media is saying that, they are encouraging the Iranians to hold on. They're sowing defeatism in the United States. And this is dragging out the conflict. The question at hand here is, first and foremost, is the media coverage of this conflict impacting the speed at which it's concluded? Is it dragging it out? All right, so I said be sure to support your response with a link to an article or media clip, and that is you talk about it, and you can talk about it contextualized to that piece of media that you're linking to. Okay. And then I say, as a starting point to this question, consider this clip of left-leaning humorist Jon Stewart, and that's not a slight, that's an analysis. Jon Stewart's take on the matter. In watching this clip, consider not only the points made by Mr. Stewart, but also, the infotainment style through which he makes them. It's about a 22-minute clip. All right. And I think what's interesting about this clip, I'll give you a preview without a spoiler. It leaves open the possibility of someone taking, looking at this from 2 different ways. On the one hand, you could look at it saying, this guy is just working overtime to make our president and our country look stupid, look incompetent, look bungling. And this is encouraging the Iranians to just drag things on because I'm going to guarantee, I can tell you with assurance that what we put on our media here is watched over there. And how do I know this? Because I spent a lot of time in the Middle East watching our media because they pick it up, they make comments on it, they repackage it, and then they present it to the people. So, watching this clip, you could take the one or two sides. You could say the media makes him look like a bungler, like an idiot. And this is encouraging the Iranians to drag this conflict out. Or you could take the position of, no, This guy is a bungler, an idiot. And it's what he's doing, not what the media is doing, that's dragging this conflict out. Now, in that position over here, there's a bifurcation. Bifurcation means split. You could say that what he's doing is dragging this thing out because he doesn't know what he's doing, or you could say that what he's doing is dragging these things out because he's not effectively communicating why it is that he's doing what he's doing. That is, he being the president. Why did they stop the military pressure? Why haven't they cleared the Straits of Hormuz? Is the president effectively communicating that? And you know, with all the factors in play, like national security and stuff that you don't and can't disclose, is he handling the communication well? And is the handling of the communication what's dragging this conflict out, not what the media is doing? I'm not telling you which position to take, okay? But what I'm asking you to do is to think about, you know, those possibilities, and in weighing the evidence, you tell me if you think the media is having any impact. All right. All right. So that's a bonus question for this week. Okay. Now let's go to question number 4. In their essay, Farnsworth and Lichter, good German name, use the term wagging the dog. What did they mean by this term? In answering the question, be sure to cite Farnsworth and Lichter's essay for examples. Okay, Angelia, you went last. We'll take you first. Farnsworth and Lichter use the term wagging the dog to challenge the traditional idea of politicians manipulating the media. Instead, they argue that media often exerts significant influence over political actors by determining which stories receive attention and how those stories are framed. In other words, politicians frequently adapt their behavior and messaging in response to the media environment rather than controlling it. Okay, right. And this is what, you know, I think I mentioned this last week in talking about what we're going to do in week 4. And, you know, the term implies, so it's like the dog, you know, here's the, I'm trying to make a tail here, so bear with me. How am I doing? Okay. Still not so good. Okay, like this. All right, now here we go. All right, so here's the dog and here's the tail. And the dog is supposed to wag the tail. In this scenario, the little bit controls the dog. So the smaller entity, the media, controls the larger entity, the government, not the other way around. Okay. Yes, that's what we mean by that. Okay, question number 2. How, according to Domke et al., was the Bush administration able to take control of press coverage concerning the passage of the Patriot Act? Were the things that they did beneficial to our democracy? Now, I realize in putting this question up, this might seem like ancient history to some of you. But I'm going to argue that the passage of the Patriot Act, especially, you know, folks in the Robertson School of Government, well, I'd put it in the top 3 most significant pieces of legislation to land on the front doorstep of all Americans within the last 30, maybe even 50 years. Civil Rights Act is big. Affordable Care Act is big. Patriot Act is big because this opened the door for a lot of changes about how the judicial process works, about how information is gathered, about the allowance of governments to spy on its citizens, even, you know, squashing all the challenges to anybody asserting their Fourth Amendment rights to unreasonable search and seizure. I mean, under the Fourth Amendment, there has to be sufficient cause to search you or your effects. So there has to be something about how you're behaving, or some sort of indicator detected by a law enforcement officer. You know, they pull up on you, you get pulled over in your car, for instance, and they ask you to roll down your window, and they could smell alcohol on your breath. That's reasonable suspicion. So they can remove you from your vehicle and they can initiate a search for alcoholic beverages or drugs or whatever. Okay. How is it that you know, airports and now an expanding number of places are these strange magical lands in which the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply? that just because you're in there, they get to go through all of your stuff. They get to x-ray your stuff. They get to pat you down. They get to x-ray your body. That the wide open, throw open the gates of that came about because of the Patriot Act. And that's just one of a whole bunch of things. All right, let's take a look. Lucas. Bush administration used two strategic techniques to influence the positive coverage of 9/11 post-legislative efforts. Early communication that established a positive public narrative ahead of any congressional review on the legislation, and rigidly consistent talking points. And this is the important one, right? This administration got the narrative together early on and did a heck of a good job sticking to the script. And that includes, too, the getting the narrative together and sticking to the script, the lead up for the second war with Iraq. We have to go in there to remove the weapons of mass destruction. Now, I was in Iraq a lot during the conflict with the Islamic State. And I talked to a lot of people about whether or not there were weapons of mass destruction. And it's interesting because among the Iraqis, the opinions were mixed. Some said no, never happened. And I talked to government officials. They said, no, this was Saddam Hussein, talking it up, trying to look big to the Iraqi people. And there were others that were saying, oh yeah, there were lots of weapons here. We just moved them out, sent them to Syria, sent them to Jordan. They were here. Neither here nor there. The administration, very effective at its consistent narrative. Okay. Talking points for executive leaders that left little opportunity for journalists to consider writing about diverse approaches to addressing national security. Both strategies are grounded in traditional public relations theory, but it's also worth noting that these same tactics, moving quickly and showing a unified front, are equally obvious and important in any crisis management plan. Good point. Public was nervous and needed leadership and communication that clearly and with confidence that there was a direct path forward. Also a good point. I'm wondering if I have a book here. Yeah, hang on for a second. Pause for 1 second. I want to get a book because I want to show you something. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. I hadn't thought of this in advance of reading your answer, Lucas. As an historian and a communication scholar, I'll admit something to you. How can I put this without sounding like a negative Nelly? I am annoyed. There, how's that? By the use of the term Nazi. No, he's a Nazi. She's a Nazi. He's a Nazi. It's like, time out. The reason the National Socialists, Nazi, of Germany were so successful is not because they were evil, and they were evil, okay? So they weren't evil, but their success was not grounded in their malfeasance. Their success was grounded in 14 years of work and carefully studied, tried, adjusted, and retried modes of communication and connecting with the public. And one of the things that you see over and over and over and over is they understood. They how do we know that because they wrote this back and forth to each other, that they needed a crisis point, a point in which the public would be open and eager, and in some instances, even desperate for a clear message, a unified front, a sense of confidence, and energetic resolve. And as a citizen, you should watch out for those things. Okay? I mean, I'm not saying you give a pass on someone who's a racist or an anti-Semite. That's not my point. If you're really worried about an individual or individuals, a block of members of a particular government party, taking over in a Nazi-style way, those are more the hallmarks than perfidious opinions like racism or anti-Semitism. And I want to, and maybe I've recommended this before, so please forgive me. You know, they say history doesn't repeat itself. Historians just repeat themselves. And I can certainly attest to that. The book of all books. Now, this isn't the only thing ever written on it, but if you know nothing about Hitler, the National Socialist, how it was that this political party took over and completely flipped upside down what had been a great intellectual, engaged, very world focused. Let's get along. Let's educate everybody in one another country, that is Germany, and how they turned it into a totalitarian state that was bent on conquering everywhere that touched it and everywhere that didn't. It's like, what really made the Nazis, right? If that question ever walks through your mind, this is the book that you need to read. All right, especially if you don't know a lot about it. The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, A History of Nazi Germany by William Shirer, right there. He was an American journalist born in who was in Germany during the rise of Adolf Hitler. Saw him a lot, went to his speeches, used to see him coming and going. What was several times just feet from him, and had the opportunity to observe the entire program unfold. And central to it was this very focused, consistent message that gave off the sense that we know what we're doing, we know what needs to be done, and we have the proven energy to get it done. Now, that, I have to be careful about how I say this. For those of you in government, that component of the message is frequently more important. That is, I know what I'm doing, I have a clear vision, and I have the demonstrated momentum, capacity, energy to get it done. Okay, that part of the message is frequently the most important part. The what to get done and what you're doing. And happily, many of the citizenry don't pay as much attention to that as they do, that is the what you're going to do, to that other bit. I mean, I don't think that's a good thing, but that's just how people are. All right. Are equally obvious and important in any crisis management plan. The public was nervous and needed leadership that communicated clearly with confidence. There was a direct path forward, suggesting that the actions of expedient and consistent communication were uniquely ideated and applied by Bush's team for the purpose of media manipulation, maybe focusing on correlation more than causation. No, actually, I think it was causation. After public opinion polls shows immediate support of the trade-off between reduced civil liberties and the increase in security. And I'll tell you why, because many people didn't understand what the reduced civil liberties entailed. Legislators with no policy in hand to examine were not likely to go against any voter sentiment in the aftermath of the national tragedy. So, with the public showing support for this tightening of policies and politicians refraining from the typical party arrangements that would have really looked bad in such a moment, the media was left with little to report or when examining these monumental changes. Okay, good answer. And yeah, true. That's how it happened. Question number 3. Sellers notes that since the 1950s, members of Congress have increasingly acted in ways designed to manipulate the press to their personal advantage. Consider Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's TikTok account. And then I give you the link. And I know, and giving you this, that presupposes that you have a TikTok account, and in order to watch the videos. I don't have a TikTok account. All right, is this a good example of what Sellers calls members of Congress acting as individual entrepreneurs, that is, media entrepreneurs? Okay. Let me see who, Kirsten, let's take a look at you. As the volume of available media grows through radio, television, print, social media, legislation become more exposed to public scrutiny through press, motivating politicians to independently promote their agendas and to gain media favor. Seller highlights events with constituent and staff produced press releases as key media legislators use to gain media attention. But since the publication of his research 2000 in the 2000s, social media as a primary channel for legislators to act as individual entrepreneurs. True and true, Kirsten. But remember, what we're looking at here is what might be called the maxim, that the truism of the study. That is, do members of Congress use media to act? And when we say use, I mean, there's some manipulation going on here, to act as media entrepreneurs. So whether they're doing this in the newspaper, on the radio, or TikTok, now how they do it will change to best, you assume, take advantage of the platform. But what we're interested in is do they do it? Okay. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez TikTok account is a good example of Seller's point, because she uses her videos to frame her message independently from her party, potentially affecting both the press and her constituents directly. She does this in several ways: coordinating messages with other legislators, featuring existing voter support for her legislative goals, and presenting issues from a perspective that benefits her own agenda. Okay, and then you give an example. Yes, excellent response. And also, there's another phenomenon here that she is leveraging, or anybody else on social media, and that is one of the changes that social media has brought to the both political and media landscape. As those two things, remember our triangle. So what are we doing here? Media, people, government. Okay, both how government and media interact with people. One of the changes that social media has brought is what could be called the rise of the non-expert expert. People are tuning into social media and taking advice on, everything from as benign as how to make a sourdough starter. And what I mean by benign is that some may argue against it, saying, oh no, the gut biome, but your overall life trajectory isn't going to be that affected by whether or not you're baking sourdough bread. Okay, I'm not knocking anybody who bakes bread. So benign to really significant topics like, how do you date? How do you make a decision about who to vote for? What career do you pursue? Is this an economy in which you can expect to make your way, or is it all stacked against you and it's hustle, man? I know I'm being a little, I'm deriding certain opinions. Pardon me. Anyway, people are watching people whose only qualification to pontificate on these matters is that they're there, which is not the best of qualifications to say, well, I'm qualified to be watched because you're watching me. Kind of circular. All right. And so members, in government are leveraging this and going, whiz bang boom, I'm now the expert because I'm expounding. Number 4, did Dr. Martin Luther King and the SLC manipulate the media? If so, what were some of the elements of the strategy of media manipulation ever good for democracy? In other words, this gets at the question of do the means, the way we do things, are they ever justified by the ends? Well, we've got to get to here, therefore we're going to do this. And yeah, maybe they're doing this, and I'm not talking about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King now, I'm just talking about anything. Yeah, that maybe the way we're doing it's not so good, but the ends are so important. Okay. Lakeisha. Dr. Martin Luther King and the SCLC manipulated the media. Full stop. Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's if you saw this as a true false, you'd say true. The media was one of the most important factors in the civil rights movement. The strategy of confronting media coverage at big events, arrests, and mistreating African Americans was the result of movements dependent on media coverage. Dr. Martin Luther King participated in countless interviews and protests that were front page. This propelled his and the SCLC agenda. This type of media manipulation is very good for democracy. Truth needed to be televised. Okay. All right. Now, I'm not. Your answer is a good one. The only thing I'm going to challenge you on there is that media manipulation is good. Okay. Now, the cause may have been good. And by the way, when we say SCLC, it's Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The cause certainly was good, but the question is not whether the cause was good. That's not what we're asking. The question is media manipulation good? Now, interestingly, concerning this very topic, Southern Christian Leadership Conference and Dr. Martin Luther King, there are media figures, and I think one of them is Matt Walsh, who works at the Daily Wire. I believe that this lands in his show, who produced videos, and maybe even Steven Crowder. These, Steven Crowder's more of a bomb thrower than Matt Walsh. He's a little subtler as a bomb thrower. But anyway, they have produced videos as of late saying the whole civil rights thing was a lie. It was a setup. Now, what they're implying is there really wasn't a problem, because they know, and I think it was Matt Walsh. Somebody run that to ground. Who produced the video, the little expose on Rosa Parks and the Atlanta busing strike? Because the argument, and I believe it's Matt Walsh, could be Steven Crowder, but I believe it's Matt Walsh, is that it wasn't just like one day Rosa Parks had to get to work and she couldn't get to work, and she went to this bus, and they said, no, you sit in the back like you're supposed to, and she said no, and then that blew up and turned into, I'm sorry, I said Atlanta, I meant Montgomery, and that turned into this giant protest. Okay, again, I believe it's Matt Walsh. He makes this documentary and say, no, this was planned, which it was. Rosa Parks was carefully selected, which she was, by people in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, because, what are you going to do? Beat up an old lady? All right. The day and the time and the bus that she got on was all picked. And therefore, again, please, somebody run this to ground and throw it up in the discussion area. Send it to me in an email and I'll put it up. Therefore, the entire busing strike and controversy in Montgomery, it was 1955, was a setup, and there really wasn't a problem. It's being rebranded as that. I'd call that media manipulation. Certainly manipulation of the issue. Okay, is that good for democracy? Yeah. All right, so you write, make sure to stay focused on the essence of the question. Number 5, are bloggers journalists? In answering this question, be sure to cite the author, etc. We'll stay with you, Akeisha. Are bloggers journalists? Bloggers can be classified as journalists. All depends on the information relayed. If the blogger is a fact checker and reports accurate information, they can be labeled as a journalist. If the blogger reports on stories from non-reliable sources, that could label them an influencer. That's an interesting distinction that's emerging today, and that's a distinction emerging from inside the group itself. Because I write op-eds, and so am I a journalist or am I an influencer? Because I write op-eds. Okay, but actually, in either way, just FYI for everybody, under the First Amendment, if you say I'm writing, I'm reporting, you fall under the protection of journal and journalism and journalist in the First Amendment. So the short answer to that is yes. Okay. Number 6, finally, consider the article from Al Jazeera, Trump and the U.S. media conflict of interest. In light of this or other examples featuring President Trump, your choice, what, in your opinion, because I give you some, if you want to look something a little more modern, what, in your opinion, might President Trump's plans be for the media? Are they good for democracy? Because he certainly does have a tumultuous relationship, we might say, with the media. In fact, if you were watching this week, it's NBC Sunday morning show, he just stormed out in the middle of the interview, screaming and hollering at the reporter that you're fake, and this is all fake, and your news organization is fake, and et cetera, et cetera. But what the Al Jazeera article points out is that these media outlets are benefiting, and they know they're benefiting because he's guaranteed to do something that will grab eyeballs. Okay, Bob, let's see what you have to say. Al Jazeera article written by Walid Salem lists several key impact Trump's presidency had on U.S. media. Salem in 2024 underlines increasing ratings and subscription, a decline in journalistic standards, non-profit-seeking coverage, and a few other weaknesses. President Trump's plans are often summarized up in his strategy to bypass traditional media while using social media to directly communicate. And this is true. And what's interesting about this is he bypasses regular media by speaking to regular media, or I should say, not speaking with them, but speaking at them. And then takes that and sticks it on social media. Interesting strategy. Salem's list implicitly underlines a few elements to explain Trump's plan. It seems that none of these are good for democracy. If we approach this situation with the 8 functions that serve and service that Gurevich and Jay Bloomler invoke as expectations for mass media and democratic systems. The authors underline some basic function service related to media performance in democracy, such as reporting on the welfare of the citizens. Don't see a lot of that. Identifying key issues, including the forces that they have formed and may resolve these issues. Don't see that. And holding officials accountable, incentives for citizens to learn, choose, or become involved rather than merely to follow tidbits, like little bits of things over the political process. Salem concludes this article by proposing that media outlets can improve their work if they want to preserve their integrity and the public's trust. This implies that elements that Salem lists in the article do not match the function and services of Gurevich and Bloomler outlined. Okay, excellent. Good answer. Good answer. By the way, if you choose to answer the bonus question, or even if you don't, for this week, question 5, and you click on the link to Jon Stewart, his latest video is he takes to task the reporter, and whose name escapes me, that was interviewing Trump when Trump walked out. And because what she does is she apologizes profusely excuse me, for what some, I mean, looking at this as a communication guy, for what is really uncalled for behavior on the part of the president. And then she comes back with saying, oh, excuse me, we've rescheduled the interview. Kristen Welker. Okay. Why? Again, I'm not being partisan here, but why, when you were, when you got that sort of reaction from a politician, that through your questions, you tried to hold him to account for things that he's done, things that he's said, as opposed to things that he's doing, and positions that he's held, as opposed to evidence that's been proffered. And he calls you a fake and a liar and a crook to your face, and then leaves the set. Why do you invite him back? I mean, are you just selling out for ratings? What's going on? So if you click on Jon Stewart and you take a look at, I think it's his latest video, he explores that. But again, remember, this is infotainment. Okay. All right. We are over our 30 minutes by 15. My apologies. All right, everybody, please get those movie reviews in. Okay. Don't torture me. All right. You see this? You see this? I'm an old man. Don't torture me. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your hard work. Hang in there. I'm thinking about you. I pray about you. Until next time, I will see you on Canvas. Bye-bye.